So the way that I draw the line between manifestation and magnetism is essentially manifestation is the way that we curate our external world and our external environment. It's the things that we want for ourselves. Magnetism, which is my take on how we create our lives, is the creation from within. When I have X, I will feel Y.
Right.
And the dialogue around magnetism is, without X, how can I cultivate Y from within? The only reason we've ever wanted something is because we think it's going to make us feel differently about ourselves. It's going to cultivate something from within us. So I grew up with a father that was addicted to drugs. And when it came to the end of his life, his biggest regret was the fact that he didn't spend more time with us and that he couldn't see what was in front of him the whole time, between 12 and 60,000 thoughts per day. Those thoughts, 80% tend to be negative and 95% tend to be the exact same as the day before.
What is the difference between knowing something and believing it?
Believing is an act of the mind, knowing is a function of the body.
How can I manifest the perfect partner?
I recommend for anyone listening to have that practice.
Amber, hi.
Hi.
Welcome to New York's Millennial Mind.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here. Sunshine walk on the way.
Such
New York
a nice
spring.
day today. Today was the first day I wasn't cold here, which is a winner for me. I mean, I did wear 6 layers, but I mean, we'll just ignore that.
You have to derobe. That's the thing with New York in springtime. You have to have several layers that you're willing to part with
it's
as
the
the
same
day
as the UK.
goes on. Yeah.
I never know what to wear there. And I'm super excited for today because I feel like you're going to give me a complete different perspective on what we're seeing on the law of attraction and manifesting. So let's just start with a very basic definition. What do you think manifesting is?
So the way that I draw the line between manifestation and magnetism is essentially manifestation is the way that we curate our external world and our external environment. It's the things that we want for ourselves. I want this career. I want this type of partner. I want to be living in this type of home, right? That has to do with the things we experience outside of ourselves. Whereas magnetism, which is my take on how we create our lives, is the creation from within. So how can we create the experiences of how we wish to feel from within and then radiate those experiences towards us? Perhaps that may look very different to how we had perceived them to look in our mind, right? Which is the path that manifestation takes us on. We have an idea that I want a partner and he's 6'2" and he's working in finance, but where does that come from? You know, there's so much programming instilled upon us of what we think that we want for ourselves or what we think will make us happy versus what actually will make us happy. And that's signaled by an inner feeling, an inner experience. So, you know, I went down my own path of manifestation for a long time, and I have a lot of grief from my 20s, from sitting in my room and imagining how I wanted my life to be instead of actually going out and living it. And I think the word manifestation has sort of become inseparable to this idea of perfectionism, that we have to be some perfect version of ourselves, or you only attract what you feel you're worthy of receiving. But I was sitting there experiencing things, you know, coming into my life that were amazing, but I had this doubt or this imposter syndrome that I didn't actually feel worthy of it. And it was sort of this confronting thing. And I had this fundamental fear that I was going to lose it or it was going to slip between my fingers.
Right.
Because of all that programming from manifestation, that you either get it right or you get it wrong, or you're worthy or you're unworthy. And I don't believe in that sense of polarity anymore. And I think it's given me the permission to live more authentically and more wholly in my life. And so that's my mission, that's my statement, and that's something that I'm so passionate about sharing with other people, because we have to give ourselves permission to be ourselves.
Yes.
And I don't think manifestation leaves a hell of a lot of room for that.
So do you believe manifestation is toxic?
Yes. But
why?
I think it can be.
Okay.
So I think manifestation is a beautiful practice to awaken us to how we can more consciously create our lives. And that's such a beautiful thing. At the same time, I think the dialogue around manifestation in society at the moment, and in our cultural dialogue, is very much focused around these external things that will give us more status or credibility or validate something within ourselves that we're not validating for ourselves internally. And it leads to this perpetual chase, right? And
yes,
I come from a background of modeling before I went into really owning my writing and really showing up online in that
space. You look like a model.
Well, my gosh, it was a really challenging time for me, honestly. And I think it made me question my self-worth. It made me question my value in the world, because I was on this perpetual chase of trying to validate myself through external experiences and through the validation of other people. And I think it really got wrapped up into this idea of manifestation, that if only I can get this agency, or if only I can land this next job. And it just became this never-ending journey. And I think that's something we've all experienced. I'm sure yourself included, of
100%.
It never feels like enough.
You're so right. I just did a workshop on Sunday about creating a vision board. And as you're speaking, it's just made me think, because somebody said, how often do you create a vision board? And I said, well, I look at it quite a lot, and probably every 6 to 8 months, I revisit it, and everything that's come off, I replace it.
Oh,
and as you're speaking, I'm like, shit, I'm constantly looking for new things to put on there, and to be like, yep, that's done, next. That's done. Okay, what's the next goal? And we are all wrapped up at the moment in believing that we have to be attracting things into our lives by chasing them. You're never just going to dream it and wish it and do it. And I do believe that. Like, you can't just dream of $1 million and it's going to come into your life. But you are right. When we're thinking about manifesting, it's always about creating a lot of money, or creating a lot of success, or living in your dream house. How can that be changed? Like, isn't that a good thing to have goals? Isn't that a good thing to want to be better?
100% agree with you. And as someone that's goal-orientated, I completely resonate with that. It's this constantly moving placement of where we are and where we want to be. And the words that I come back to is that we always exist between the place of where we've been and where we're going. And I think making peace with that and understanding that we're always on the way somewhere. So how can we make that moment feel full? How can we make that moment feel rich, even if, we're not experiencing that in our external reality just yet?
Yes.
How can we lean into the abundance of air to breathe? How can we lean into the abundance of connection in our lives? How can we be more present with the people that we love, so that we don't become so hyper fixated on where we're going that we miss the ride there, right?
Right.
And so I think it's a beautiful thing to constantly have desires. And in fact, it's something I talk about in the book, a very much a positive thing as human beings, as we're constantly wanting to grow and evolve and move on to the next thing. And it keeps us moving forward, right? We're inspired by this vision that we're moving towards. But there's this narrative now that place is more important than where you are. And where you are is just the means to
get there.
You're exactly right.
But I guess, what's the problem with manifestation if you're just like, I'm just going to enjoy the present? I guess that's what we're saying here, right? We're so focused on the next goal, we're not enjoying the present. But what if somebody said, well, you know what? I do enjoy the present. I'm just constantly looking for new things to manifest into my life.
I mean, I honor anyone that's owning what's true for them. So if you're resonating with that and that's working for you, then amazing. I'm not going to rob someone of their truth. But where magnetism comes in is that we have this perspective that when I have X, I will feel Y.
Right.
And the dialogue around magnetism is, without X, how can I cultivate Y from within? And so if I'm looking for the relationship that I'm craving, for example, and I'm really thinking about this person, or really getting tied up into the specifics of what that person is going to be like and what it's going to be like to be with them, we fixate on the details, on the external, on the physical, right?
I'm getting you.
And not about our experience, because the only reason we've ever wanted something is because we think it's going to make us feel differently about ourselves. It's going to cultivate something from within us. So magnetism is all about taking responsibility for our internal being, our internal state, and realizing that you can cultivate any of those feelings from within in this moment right now. And I think that's quite frightening in a way sometimes, because it requires us taking responsibility for our own internal states. And it's not to say that we're going to feel abundant and joyful in every moment. That's not the point. I think it's really important to allow ourselves the humanness of life and the roller coaster of life. But knowing that we have that capacity to cultivate it from within, so that we don't constantly feel like we're searching for the thing that's missing.
I'm really, this is so fascinating, because actually I just think I finally got it. So what you're saying is that instead of me saying, I wish I had £1 million, it's what would that give me? Okay, it would give me security. It would give me comfort. It would make me feel like I was successful. But I can probably feel like I'm successful now. Why do I need that $1 million check to feel successful? So instead of manifesting that, I have to actually create that feeling within myself. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and leaning into the experiences in this moment that's within reach to this experience right now that validate that state of being, which are available to each of us in every moment. You know, you can...
Right.
Were you successful in the way that you spoke to your partner when you woke up in the morning? Were you successful in the way that you made choices that affirm your sense of well-being and make you feel good about yourself? You know, there's so many different perspectives that we can take upon that. And the beautiful thing is when we do that, when we validate it in this moment, those things actually radiate towards us a lot faster than when we're focusing, sitting there like, I want £1 million, I want £1 million, I want £1 million. And it's not to invalidate someone that's wanting to achieve financially, because if that's in your heart, that's amazing. But just doing some discovery work to figure out, well, what is it that I think this experience is going to deliver to me?
Oh, honestly, I was getting teary as you were speaking, because as you said that, it just reminded me of how much control we have over our own lives and our own day. And it's just inspired me so much to just think differently. And every time someone makes me think differently, I get emotional.
Oh, I love that.
So thank you for sharing that. That's so powerful. But what is the law of magnetism?
Magnetism is the way in which we can create an experience from within. And when we create that experience within, like we're talking about,
yes,
that's when we have that experience validated by our external environment. So
got it.
It sort of flips the mathematical equation of manifestation on its head and takes responsibility for our own lives in this moment, rather than waiting for some future experience to deliver us what we want. And the reason I'm so passionate about this is because I grew up with a father that was addicted to drugs, and I remember sitting with him. He passed away a couple of years ago.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. And it was really difficult to see him because he was obsessed with success and obsessed with the next achievement and the next deal and constantly moving forward.
Yeah.
And when it came to the end of his life, his biggest regret was the fact that he didn't spend more time with us and that he couldn't see what was in front of him the whole time. And I think it's something that so many of us can relate to. And it's something I'm so passionate about, because it's not this or that. We don't have to be the Zen monk in the mountains and constantly present and grateful, or we don't have to be blindly led by our desires of what we think we want for ourselves. How can we integrate those two experiences into this moment right now, allowing ourselves to be present as we create what we want, instead of them being separate choices, if that makes sense?
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. So difficult, because I really resonate with what you're saying. And I think, if we had a diary count of how many people said that towards the end of their life, it would be crazy, because so many of us are not living our lives to what we have today. We're just constantly in a rat race. And then when we get to the end, we're going to be like, what was I doing that for? And I think I try and ask myself this question now more than ever of like, what am I doing it for? I recorded a podcast yesterday about toxic productivity. And I just released one in the UK when they were talking about stress. And I was challenged so much in both of those podcasts, which I love. I love it when I have to challenge my own thinking of but I have to be stressed to be successful. What do you mean? Nobody is successful without incurring a little bit of stress. Yes, we all incur a little bit of stress, but we don't need to be chronically stressed. Yeah. It's not a badge of honor. And I think what you're trying to say as well with the manifesting and the magnetism is that they work in tandem, right?
Yeah.
You can do both.
Yes.
But I think this makes so much more sense. A lot of people struggle with manifestation because it's out of your control.
Yeah.
I want something. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to wish for it, but I'm going to align my actions to it for sure. But actually that is out of my control. The outcome is, the process is not.
Yeah.
What you're saying is that the outcome is actually within our control, because the feeling you're going to get from getting that thing, you can feel now. Yeah. Which I think is incredible. But for some people who are really struggling with their negative thoughts, there's a lot of stuff going on at the moment where people are feeling really distressed. They're feeling like they're stuck in this negative habit loop. They don't believe that they can get out of this mindset where they have really low self-worth. How do those people start with the law of magnetism? Because how can you manifest or attract good things into your life from a negative place?
Fantastic question. And I think there's so many of us that can relate to that, and myself included. I'm not sitting here talking about things that I haven't personally navigated and experienced. I have been through some of the darkest days of my life, and here I am sitting across from you, right? So I know that there are things that work and that there are things that can pull anyone out of that place because I've been there myself.
Yes.
And so when I'm working with clients, what we do is we usually become more aware of the thoughts that are coming up. So we can't change what we're not aware of. And so bringing awareness to the tone of our mind and the dialogue of the mind helps us to just be more conscious of, oh, I'm thinking, and not all of my thoughts are necessarily true. So even something like listening to this podcast, for anyone that's listening, that's a beautiful experience because you're opening your mind up to a different way of being and thinking, and even seeing us talk to one another and sharing these stories and sharing where we've come from is very validating to expand a new belief system that, oh, there's another way of being in the world, that there's another pathway possible, right? For anyone that's really struggling with a lot of anxious thoughts or a lot of negative thoughts, you know, even just to validate this, we have between 12 and 60,000 thoughts per day. I've definitely felt on the higher side of that spectrum before.
Yes.
Of those thoughts, 80% tend to be negative and 95% tend to be the exact same as the day before.
No way.
Isn't it so fascinating? And so what happens is the dialogue of our mind is a story we tell ourselves about ourselves repetitively every day. And it's affirming where we've been, not where we're going. And so how do we change that dialogue? How do we open up that new pathway to reinforce new thoughts?
Yes.
Awareness being part of that. And a simple exercise is simply freehand journaling in the morning and getting it out on paper. We can see tangibly in front of us the narrative we're telling ourselves about ourselves. And there are often conspiracy theories that we tell ourselves. And so validating, okay, I can see my thoughts in front of me. I exist separate to my thoughts. My thoughts are observations about the world, and they're validating old belief systems, but they're not who I am. I am more than my thoughts. And simply a statement like that can be really powerful to interrupting that mental dialogue, right? When we're finding ourselves going down the rabbit hole and we're going low, deeper and deeper and deeper. I'm more than my thoughts. My thoughts are observations. And that statement creates a little separation. And in that separation, we have space between ourselves, our higher selves, our connection to life, our connection with universe, cosmic energy, all that good stuff, God, if that resonates with you. And in that space, we can redirect our attention and energy. So we can interrupt that thought process. So instead of constantly validating, in that space, we have the freedom to make a new choice. And in that new choice, that might simply be just distracting yourself onto something else.
Right.
Okay, how can I look around me? How can I touch my hands? How can I become more present with this physical moment? Taking yourself out of those thoughts. Because when we're stuck in that dialogue of the mind, we're validating that story over and over and over again.
Yeah.
The biggest key to change is simply interrupting that dialogue. And then we can make new choices and things like affirmations, things like meditating, breath work, whatever that looks like to you. Simply walking through the park and becoming aware of the world around you is a really powerful way of disconnecting from existing in the mind.
Yes.
And becoming more present into your day. And that simple exercise of being more present with your life allows you an alternative path in the brain. And in that, you can choose to validate positive thoughts, introduce new positive self-dialogue, things like the affirmations.
Yes.
All of those are rewiring our brain to show up in a different way, to think differently on a daily basis. And those thoughts are going to feel really foreign at first. And that's something I notice a lot with my audience and with clients is, I don't believe those thoughts.
Yes.
I don't believe I'm worthy. I don't believe I'm good enough. So it feels really strange to be saying that to myself. And I always love to remind people that those thoughts aren't you. They were just familiar. They're just a story you've been telling yourself. And so in order to feel differently, you have to start telling yourself a new story about yourself.
Right.
And over time and with repetition, that allows us to integrate that story as our own again. And it really is that process of repetition that is our key to change. But we often try things and then we slip right back into those old patterns, right?
Yes.
I'm sure you've had the same
100%
experience when you try to work out more, or you're trying to drink more water, and you have the first day and you feel great, and the second day you drop off the wagon.
Yeah.
Allowing ourselves the imperfection of slip-ups, I think, is really important, so that it's not all or nothing. I tried it for 3 days and then never mind, I slipped up, I'm never going to go back to it. But allowing ourselves the space to doubt ourselves and the space to actually not believe those new thoughts to begin with, and moving forward and taking action anyway. And I think anyone that's ever created something in their lives that's new has had that experience where you don't believe the positive thoughts you're telling yourself.
100%.
But it's not that they're not true. It's just that you're more familiar with the negative thoughts.
Wow.
And so you have to re-familiarize yourself with a new way of speaking to yourself about yourself. And that is a key to change long term. And we meet these constant evolutions of ourselves, right? And you would have experienced this yourself. You reach one level, like we're talking about the desires that spring forth, and we keep moving forward. At every stage of that journey, we have to begin telling ourselves a new story. We have to regulate the nervous system. We have to expand into that experience. And so it's very natural to doubt the positive thoughts about yourself.
So true.
It's just a part of growing and evolving. And I think building in a tolerance for the disbelief, but still showing up and acting in alignment with the vision and where you're going and validating that experience is so powerful. But we have this belief system that, oh, my thoughts are true and I have to take them as fact. And the reality is it's just a past dialogue, a past version of yourself speaking to you in this present moment.
So true.
And we have that choice to listen to a new narrative at any point.
I love that. I think that is so powerful, because one of the exercises I always tell people to do, and you guys can do this at home right now if you're watching or listening, is really when you're in a good mood is to create different types of lists. And those lists serve as evidence. So when you're saying to yourself, look, I feel fake by saying I'm confident because there's so many times where I haven't been confident, create a list for yourself and write down 3 times where you're confident in your life. Write down 3 achievements that you never thought you could do. Write down 3 things where you were a risk taker. Because a lot of the time we identify ourselves with certain characteristics because it matches the recent thing that we've done.
Yeah.
So if I was recently somebody who didn't take a risk and come to New York and film this podcast season, then I'm going to, next time I want to take a risk, be like, I'm not a risk taker. Because, you know, I just didn't take this risk just now. But now that I've done this just now, for the next thing I'll be like, oh no, I'll take the risk because I'm confident because I've just made this decision. And so many times I've made decisions based on my last decision.
Yeah.
So, and that works when it's positive. But sometimes when I'm not in the mood, so, you know, I bumped into somebody last week in London, and I was telling the story of how I had such a powerful conversation with someone that morning. And so when I saw that person, I was in a good mood and I went up to them, and it was Simon Sinek. I don't know if you know him.
Oh, of course I know it.
And I was literally like, oh my God, I'm going to go say hi. So I went up to him and I went and said hi. But there've been many times where I've woken up, I'm in a bad mood. I've had an argument with someone, I'm feeling upset, and I would see Simon Sinek and I perhaps wouldn't have the balls to go and say hi. And what would happen the next time was, well, I didn't disturb him last time, so I'm not going to disturb the next person.
Yeah.
And I would have evidence to show me that it wasn't a good decision. So what I do when I'm having a good day is I make lists of characteristics that I want to be and evidence to support that. So that when I'm having a bad day or when I want to have that moment where I'm like, wait, I need to check myself. So I've got this negative thought that I'm not confident. Hold on. I have a list on my phone to prove to me that I am confident. I'm going to read that evidence list. And now I'm going to feel much more confident to completely change my thought.
It's such a powerful exercise.
So powerful.
It's almost like Mythbusters, you know, for these conspiracy theories we have about ourselves.
Because we all need evidence, and we all use evidence, whether it's our brain or our experiences, to make choices in our lives. So if you're struggling with that on a good day only, write down your strengths. Write down the things you're good at. Write down the things that you love about yourself. Write down what you love about your body. But more importantly, think about the characteristics that you really love about yourself. Because I guarantee on the days where you're feeling low, you're not going to believe you're worthy of anything. And I've had that same experience myself. And that's why I started to create these lists. So I have this whole folder on my phone. If someone found it, they'd be like, you are a narcissist. But, you know, it's very important sometimes to give yourself that pick me up. Because I found myself being in that loop a lot of the time. You talk a lot about believing. But what is the difference between knowing something and believing it?
Believing is an act of the mind. Knowing is a function of the body. So knowing is our intuitive self. Knowing is tapping into felt truth versus believing is intellectualizing something, right? It's the function of the mind attempting to categorize or envision of what's possible or what's our construct for reality, right? And that's often validated through experience, exactly like you're talking about. When we are talking about belief systems, we are an untrustworthy source of information, you know, things like confirmation bias of the brain, even to validate what you're saying. It's this function where we are looking for evidence to validate the beliefs we have. And so in that moment, if we're believing that we're unworthy and we're sitting across from our partner, our brain's function is to validate that truth for us. Saying, oh, you believe that you're unworthy? Let me find all the data points in this experience to validate that experience for you. So the same thing is true when we're introducing that new narrative, that new dialogue in the brain of, you know, if it feels out of reach to say, I believe I am worthy of what it is, because I know for myself that was true for a long period of time and still can be true as I face different experiences. Introducing the dialogue, what if I thought I was worthy? Because it leaves this it's almost the back door to belief in a way, because what if opens our brain to absorb different information and to gain different data points to validate that experience. So that dialogue of what if this was working in my favor? What if I was worthy of what I wanted? What would I do next? What if I knew I was loved and appreciated in this relationship? What would I focus on? And those statements help reinforce that new belief system as we're transitioning from one way of being into another. And I think we take our beliefs as ourselves and as an extension of ourselves instead of seeing them as the narrative that we're constantly reinforcing about ourselves. And I love this analogy of, you know, if you have an ant on a piece of paper and you take a Sharpie or a magic marker and you draw a circle around that ant, all of a sudden, even the paper is perfectly flat, the ant will go around and not pass over the ink on the paper because it feels like it's a wall because the texture's changed, right? So I love that analogy for the beliefs we have about ourselves. It's just this circle that we've drawn around ourselves on this piece of paper that is our totality of experience and potential. And we so often feel like that circle is too small for all that we want to be. And we come up against that circle when we face things like our comfort zone, right? Where it's everything in our system saying, turn back now, don't keep going forward. Like, this is not safe. This is not familiar. And so that analogy helps me a lot as a visual person to wrap my head around the fact, oh, we just need to expand that circle. And that's a process of what we're doing when we're expanding our nervous system. And part of that is, you know, introducing new beliefs and validating those beliefs with new dialogue and with new evidence through those what if questions, but also regulating our nervous system because we're humans. We have to adapt to change. We have to allow ourselves the self-compassion instead of screaming at ourselves and saying, why can't you do this? Or you should be able to do this, or look at everyone else who's able to do this. How can we validate ourselves through that experience of growing? Because then it makes us feel safe as we face new challenges moving forward.
Wow. Oh my gosh. The ant analogy is crazy. I'm going to try that at home. Everyone try it.
Yeah.
Do it today when you get home. I don't know if there's any ants in New York. I haven't seen any.
Thankfully, not a lot of bugs in New York.
Okay.
Yeah.
When I get back to the UK, I'm going to do this analogy. Okay. Because that's fascinating to me. And linking that to how we put ourselves into boxes or circles or we put walls around us. So powerful. I think that's incredible. Your book, You Are a Magnet.
So exciting.
It's coming out in June, right?
Yeah, June 11th in the US and then June 6th in the UK.
Okay, I'm very excited for that. Why did you title it You Are a Magnet?
You know, I was thinking about title ideas for a long time, and I think the concept of a magnet was so powerful to me because it takes that creation process from within, right? Magnets are the point of attraction. And I think taking responsibility for the fact that we are creating our lives, and I like to think of the fact that we're curating our lives because our decisions, like you were saying earlier, they're based on the information that we're noticing around us. And those belief systems we have shape the way in which we see the world. And they shape the information that we notice because we're validating those belief systems. As we go about our day, the mind's agenda is to say, hey, what did you believe about yourself? Let me find all the evidence to validate that experience.
Right.
And so this concept of you are a magnet is total responsibility, but in that is intertwined with total freedom to create more of what you want. And for me, being magnetic is being joyful and doing the things that light you up and finding ways of leaning into that and giving yourself permission to do that. And so the book is the roadmap of going from fear and into cultivating courage and cultivating a magnetic mindset, and then ties into how can we build moments of joy and abundance into the experience and the journey on the way to where we're going.
I love that.
Sort of that point around, don't get so caught up on the destination that you're missing looking out of the car window on the way there and appreciating the views. So it sort of encapsulates all the touch points of what's most important to me.
Yeah.
But in a way in which provides the practical tools and exercises at the end of each principle for someone to customize it to their own inner knowing and their own guidance, rather than me sitting there telling them exactly what to do, putting them in the power position to make those decisions for themselves that feel aligned and for them to tap into their own intelligence.
One of the most asked questions I always get is, how do I attract a man or a woman into my life? How do I attract the right relationship? How can I manifest the perfect partner? Do you believe we can?
I do believe we can, in the sense that we can create beautiful partnership and the experiences that we're creating.
Okay.
But I think that focusing and manifesting and writing these lists and sitting in your room and idealizing who that's going to be is the long track to get there. And in fact, can so often be the means to push that experience away from ourselves. When we're sitting and we're hyperfixated on what we want, basically that is inseparable to the fact that we're aware that that thing is not already present in our lives. And so when you're holding tightly onto the things that you really want in your life, you're also validating the fact that you actually don't have that in your life right now, and you're out of a state of receiving. So you're energetically out of balance with that experience, and people can feel that on you. When you really want something, it radiates from you, versus when you have that level of peace in the fact that you're comfortable with yourself to the point that you don't need anything outside of yourself to feel more confident or to feel more worthy or to feel more capable. That also radiates from you. So tying that to relationships, when we're fixated on who it is and what they're like, people can feel that energy, especially in dating environments. And so my tips and my words of advice for anyone working with that's working on attracting a relationship or creating a relationship in their life is firstly taking inventory of the beliefs they have around relationships. So what were the relationships like that they had with their parental figures? Who did they crave love from the most growing up, and what that dynamic was like? What beliefs that reinforced in you about love? Was love self-sacrificing? Was it controlling? You know, and doing an inventory of what beliefs may be there that we may now be unconsciously pushing away relationships because we don't want that experience ourselves, right? And then once we have that inventory, setting a vision, I think the tools of manifestation can be really powerful when they play a role in a greater plan or a greater way of being. So getting clear on what you want to experience, not the physical details as much as how you hope those experiences will change the way you feel from within.
Yeah.
And so if you're craving someone, you think, oh, they have to earn X, Y, or Z amount per year, right? That's something I see a lot of my friends saying, that they have to be, you know, this wealthy person, et cetera, et cetera. And I always ask them, you know, what is it about that you're craving? You know, it's not the finance that this person has. Is it because they're driven? Is it because they're motivated? Is it because they have a sense of security in the relationship? And a lot of the things we crave from our partners are actually things that we crave for ourselves. And so how can we cultivate those things for ourselves? Not in a way that's hyper independent and doesn't acknowledge the need for connection in our lives. We're not trying to be this autonomous being in the world, right? But in a way that a lot of the time I'll have friends or clients, they want to date an artist.
Right.
And I'm always like, why is it? We kind of investigate and we scratch the surface. And it's often because they are wanting to embody that trait for themselves, and they're wanting to embody that side of themselves more, and they're looking for permission to do so. And so turning that equation within, like we we're saying with the law of magnetism, how can we cultivate those things that we're seeking from within, letting go of the need for the exact details on how this is going to come into my life. And when we're validating those things for ourselves and we're leaning into daily joy and the things that light us up and our own authenticity, we radiate the right people into our life in divine timing. The truth is we can't control the timing of when we pull that person into our lives. I stand by that time and time again. Anyone telling you that you can manifest a partner within 2 months,
right?
I would love to sit down and just pick their brains about how they come up with that timeline. But knowing that you can let go of the timing, because you're not so fixated on when this person's going to come into your life. When you're showing up in your light, when you're showing up authentically, when you're showing up as yourself and owning the things that you want for yourself.
Yeah.
You naturally are this magnetic person in the room, and that draws towards you the experiences that align with you authentically.
You're talking a lot about energy, and I'm fascinated about energy because I am such a big believer that your energy says so much about you. Are we all energy?
I would say yes.
Right? Because you're talking about this high frequency and low frequency, and people don't really understand what that means. What does that mean to be on a high frequency or low frequency, high vibe, low vibe? What does that mean?
So I think it can be an intellectual thing when we're trying to break these ideas down.
Yes.
And so for an experience of knowledge, let's go into that knowing that you mentioned earlier. When you go into a room and there's someone that you know and you love and they're in a horrible mood, they're not opening their mouth, right? They're not saying a single thing. What do you feel when you enter that room? How do you know that they're in a bad mood without them saying to you, I'm not in a good mood right now? You can feel that energy communicated, right? And I think it's 93% of our communication is not spoken. No. It's all tone and it's all body language. And for me, energy really pulls into that as well. And we can feel on someone what's radiating from within them, what internal experience is going on. And when we show up into a room and we're feeling confident and we're feeling connected to ourselves, we can feel that on someone.
Yes.
That's a felt truth. And so
true.
The energetic state of being aligned with what we want, we radiate those people towards us, and it really validates that concept of being a magnet, right? I often have this little trick that I do when I'm walking around New York. If I'm, first thing in the morning, it's usually the time and place I set my energy for the day. And I'll either put on my favorite track or whatever it is, songs, music, affirmations, podcast, and I'll walk down the street as the most magnetic version of myself. And with every step, I integrate that energy into my being and I breathe it into this present moment. And the most beautiful things happen. I'll have people come up off the street and be like, wait, what are you doing with your life? Like, I don't understand. Like, how are you like glowing like this? And it's always such a beautiful experience. So I recommend for anyone listening to have that practice. Like, how can you put on your favorite song in the morning, and how can you tap into that energy, even if it feels foreign and even if it feels strange and you feel that resistance popping up, fighting through that resistance to allow yourself just one experiment this morning, or this day, and seeing what follows and seeing how people interact with you differently.
Yes. Oh my God, I'm not joking. The example you just gave of walking into a room and someone's in a bad mood without them opening their mouth is like the best thing ever, because I've never been able to articulate how someone is giving you bad energy. So in Indian culture, we believe in something called nazar, which is basically the evil eye. So often if you're showing certain parts of your life that are going really well, or you are showing loads of different elements like your relationship or your kids, or it could be anything really, but it's almost that it's not intentional that people are giving you a bad evil eye. It's just that it's like nuzzer. So it's like you don't show everything that you're doing in case something bad happens. Does that make sense? And I've always wondered like what people mean by that, because I never really got it. I was always like, I don't really know if I believe in it. But if people can give you good energy, people can give you bad energy.
And you can feel it. And I think we deny ourselves of that
100%.
felt experience and all of that intuitive experience. And definitely for myself, living in New York, I've been, if we're talking about energy, the masculine, feminine energy, in the sense that it has nothing to do with sex. It has to do with these energetic states that we're in. Masculine is to do with taking action and execution and thinking and planning and being in that state. Often confident, you know, out and about. And I love tapping into that energy. That's amazing. But I had to learn how to tap into my feminine energy, which is that intuitive self, which is that radar of energy around you, of being aware and perceptive of, how do I feel when I'm with this person? And something that I really recommend for anyone is even just doing that as an inventory exercise after you spend time with someone. How do I feel inside right now? How did that interaction, how am I feeling in this moment from that interaction? And not judging it, not labeling it, but giving yourself an opportunity to tap in and see how that experience is within you. Yes. And that's usually a really good gauge of people that you want to spend more time with and people you want to spend less time with, and not allowing the logic of the mind to say, oh, but we've been friends for 5 years.
Right.
Oh, but no, this is a good relationship for me. Or, oh, but this, I should just get over it. It's not really that big of a deal. I don't have any evidence for this.
So true. Trusting
yourself. And part of that is that feminine intuitive energy, but also just validating our own internal experience instead of constantly looking around us and saying, well, how do you feel about that person?
Yes. And I think we do this in relationships the most. So when I was in a relationship, I very much knew that this person was not right for me. And so often I would try and find a logical response instead of listening to that intuition telling me, this is not good for you. I knew 100%, and I always know when I meet somebody, are they good for me? Are they bad for me? But so much of our logical mind takes over. You know, they tick all the boxes. They're not so bad. They have all these other qualities. How the hell do you feel when you're with that person? That's the question you've got to ask yourself. But a lot of the time, we don't listen to our own intuition because as women, we can be seen to be erratic or perhaps be overthinking too much. How do you know the difference between overthinking and just having anxiety or having a very strong intuition which is telling you something?
So the way that I discern between the two, because it's very valid and I think they do get really confusing, is your intuition is always in the present moment and it's a felt truth. It's usually in the body. It's usually something that we can't intellectualize.
Right.
Whereas those anxious thoughts are triggered usually from past experiences or a future upcoming experience, and it's the dialogue of the mind constantly reinforcing itself. Intuition is in the moment. It's usually quick. It's felt, it's a feeling, it's a physical feeling, it's a knowing. Whereas that fearful mind is, I am thinking this consciously, it's of the past or of the future. So those are the two kind of buckets that I place it within, because it is difficult to discern. And I think we almost gaslight ourselves in the sense that we invalidate that intuitive feeling because we're like, oh, maybe it's just anxiety or maybe it's just fear. And you intuitively, for each of us, we do know the difference. And I think if we spend more time with ourselves, just sitting with ourselves, and it's a practice of mine that I do daily, is really sitting with myself and asking, how do you feel today? What's happening in my body?
Wow.
What's the climate of my mind like? And I think this role of an observer is really helpful to understand that we are a human being having an experience and we're observing that experience and we're narrating that experience right in the mind. So having that level of separation is very helpful, and creating those practices that allow us to tap into the body and to tap into the intuition are really powerful. Anything somatic, which is when you get into your body, will help you develop that skill of being in tune with your intuition.
I love that. And I want to relate that back to what we were speaking about in terms of relationships, because I do think people are very anxious when they've had bad experiences from their relationships. And then their intuition is kind of off because the anxiety is so strong there. So for somebody who has been through a really difficult time in relationships. You know, they haven't attracted the right person. They've been in a bad relationship after another. They feel like they're constantly attracting toxic people within their lives. What do they do? How do they completely change that for themselves?
So the first thing I would say to someone that's in that constant creation of that experience is to take a break, to take a pause. Because it's really hard to create a new belief when we are constantly reaffirming old belief systems with an experience, right?
Okay.
And the way I like to see relationships is it's this evolution of a lesson that we're being invited to learn about ourselves. And again, it's not to discredit the fact that we're in a loving relationship with somebody else and we're co-creating that relationship together, but just to understand that you play a role in the relationships that you're attracting, in the sense that there's something in that for you. There's something in that experience that's wanting to be gifted towards you. If only it's reflecting back to you that you are worthy of more than what that experience is affirming. And it can happen in the sense that that lesson keeps knocking at our door, keeps knocking at our door. It's almost the same thing coming through with a different face, especially with relationships. And so it's not to take total responsibility, especially if there's something like abuse going on. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying to take inventory of what belief system are these relationships affirming, and taking that pause so that we're not constantly re-triggering ourselves, because it's something that I believe so strongly in is you cannot change when you're in fight or flight.
Yes.
Your nervous system is overwhelmed. We don't need to do anything else. And we're not in a state where our brain is even in the receptive mode to integrating new beliefs in that state. So regulating your nervous system is going to be really important. And part of that is taking that little pause, and not in the sense that we have to heal completely before we go and have another relationship, but just a slight pause to take that inventory, right? Of what belief system are my past relationships affirming?
Right.
Where was the earliest experience in my life where I experienced that belief system being validated? Okay. Going back into those moments, going back into those past experiences, and sort of seeing the through line in our story narrative. I always love the exercise of writing out the story of yourself. And if you were to sit with a pen and paper and to, write a movie plot about your life, what are the themes? Who are the characters? What are the relationships like? Again, that helps us get into that observer role of our lives rather than being so entwined in the experience. And so once we have that information, we can see that belief system. And again, building in those moments of awareness, those moments of pause, the moments of space, and finding examples of different relationships around us that affirm that there's another way that's possible is really important. So perhaps in your social sphere, in your circle, in your home environment, you didn't see healthy relationships. And I, for one, did not see healthy relationships growing up. There was a lot of emotional abuse. I had no idea what a healthy relationship looked like. And I brought that into my early 20s. I brought that into my own programming for what relationships should or could be. And I'm in a beautiful relationship now. So much respect. It's so grounded. Nice. We can the concept of sitting and speaking to one another, when something comes up and you're talking through it and you're problem solving together, and it's a true sense of partnership.
For sure.
That's definitely not the experience I've always had. And so to sharing that, because it affirms for anyone listening that there is a way through, and that there is a way of actually reintegrating different belief systems.
Yes.
Finding different examples of healthy relationships that are healthy to you, because we all have our own desires in relationships, right?
Yes.
It's not, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle.
Exactly.
It's your own perception of what you need. Sometimes people want a lot of space. Sometimes people want to be really close. So go out and search online or in movies on relationships that resonate with you.
Yeah.
That will help affirm to your brain that those things are also possible for you too. And ideally, those are people that you relate to or resonate with on some level, just because it helps expand that belief system again. And once you've taken a break from that dating experience, slowly starting to date again, constantly kind of bringing in that practice of nervous system regulation through whatever means that looks like to you. Perhaps, again, meditation, breath work, going on regular walks. And when you're dating, instead of bringing to mind your idea of who you should be dating, interact with people based on the feeling of how you are experiencing, the feeling of what you're experiencing when you're with that person. And that's going to be such a beautiful signal of what's for you and what's not for you. Because so often those belief systems that we've had that are toxic relationships or whatever those experiences were, it's the mind then going out and trying to search and find that person in the room.
Right.
And we can go into a room and we can be craving this really aligned relationship that feels rewarding, it feels safe, it feels secure. And we don't even recognize that person when we're in the room, right? Because our brain is unconsciously looking for the person that validates our old story about relationships. And so tapping out of the mind and out of what we think we want for ourselves, again, manifestation and this idea of what we think will make us happy, and into what do I feel when I'm with this person? Sometimes we see someone in front of us that we didn't even recognize before. We didn't even see them clearly before because we were denying that felt truth with that person. How we feel when we're lit up and we're laughing and we're engaging with them. Follow that. That is always my advice to anyone. Follow those breadcrumbs of joy and felt experience of joy rather than your mind's idea of what will make you happy, and you'll end up in the most beautiful places.
For sure. And I think that we are told to look at relationships like a shopping list.
Yeah.
Describe their height, describe their eyes, describe their build, describe their language, whatever it is. It's really shocking. And I don't think dating apps help with that either because it's literally made for you.
Yeah.
But, you know, what are some of the things that stop people from manifesting the right partner? What are some of the things that block them from creating this perfect relationship? Not that any relationship is perfect, but perfect for them.
So, belief systems.
Yeah.
And that playing the role in the mind, again, confirmation bias. We're constantly scanning our environment to validate old belief systems.
Okay.
And so that can block us in the way of if we saw a relationship growing up that was really toxic and looked really painful to be in, and that was our programming of what relationships should or could be like, we may be unconsciously blocking ourselves from connecting to other people. Right. Or, for example, if you had a family member or a parental figure that had an abandonment of the family unit, or, you know, whether that was through work, through addiction, or through physically leaving, that can enforce an abandonment wound, which essentially gives us a fear of being in intimate relationships that person will leave us in a vulnerable place.
Right.
And so that powerful exercise of taking inventory and, again, taking responsibility for the story we have is going to be really important in identifying in what ways we may be blocking our own blessings.
Yes.
And this concept of magnetism, that from within out, it's not so much that you have to go and do and be anything else. It's a matter of shedding away all of the crap that we've layered upon ourselves, about ourselves, so that we can shine through and so that we can actually have the things that we truly, authentically want. So it's a matter of letting go of those disempowering stories more than it is about showing up as someone that we're not already authentically are. And so taking inventory of those blocks, taking inventory of the ways that we may actually be unconsciously pushing away relationships is a really good starting point. And then, you know, even with the way in which we avoid emotional intimacy.
Yes.
And the tools I would share with someone in that place, you know, you're finding it really hard to be emotionally vulnerable. Usually that's because we're not being emotionally vulnerable with ourselves. And it's a fascinating reframe is, you know, if you're attracting emotionally unavailable partnerships into your life, it's more often than not reflecting to you that you are in some way also emotionally unavailable.
Wow.
And it's validating that experience for you. So again, taking inventory, seeing everything as an invitation to grow, not that you are broken or you need to be fixed, but in the sense that all of the experiences we have are just data points to learn and to grow and to develop, and not in a way to be some perfect version of ourselves.
Yeah, for sure.
But just to get closer to our own truth and to our own experience and what we want to experience more of and what we want to experience less of, right? Yeah. That's important information as well. Sometimes we have dating experiences and we realize, definitely not that.
100%.
Definitely not that one. So really reframing those dynamics instead of blaming the relationships we're having for those experiences, just taking inventory and not in a way of blaming ourselves, but just in a way of taking that responsibility, knowing that responsibility is our key to freedom and is our key to creating more of what we want.
I love that. And, you know, this whole conversation has been so centered around there is a way out. You know, you can get out of this. You don't have to be stuck in this thinking. It's okay if you are. Be the observer and find a route. What's the craziest thing you've attracted or manifested into your life?
I would have to say the book deal. And the reason I say that is because it's been on my lists of things that I've wanted to create for myself, my goals, my ambitions since I was 18 or so.
Okay.
And I went about that around the normal manifestation route of me sitting down, writing down, I want to be a writer. I want to have a published book deal over and over and over again for several years and not doing anything about it.
Okay.
And sort of imagining and idealizing, oh, I can't wait for when that happens. Meanwhile, I wasn't actually taking a single step in that direction.
Right.
So fast forward to 2022, I was traveling with my partner and it got to this point where I was writing out another list of goals and I saw again on that list, write a book. And I almost had this level of frustration with myself.
Yes.
I was like, I'm not waiting around anymore for this. This is the moment. And I remember going up to my boyfriend and saying, I'm going to write a book. And he looked at me and he's like, okay, do it. Amazing. Go for it. And I sort of was hoping for him to be like, oh, I don't know if you should, you know, you have that unconscious desire.
Yes.
And so I just started. I started writing and I trusted the fact that if I take action, this is going to come into my life. And fast forward literally 2 weeks, I got an email through my website saying from Penguin and saying, hey, have you ever thought about writing a book? And I would love to talk to you more about this. And it started this whole journey. And I actually ended up signing with Hachette at the start of last year. Phenomenal experience, was so divinely guided, absolutely had its ups and downs of feeling worthy and feeling unworthy. But it was this validation that when you show up, when you take responsibility, when you cultivate that feeling from within, how would I show up in the world if I was already a writer?
So true.
And I took action, and then to have that experience radiate through as an outcome was such a beautiful validation and such a massive goal that's come to fruition. So that was a beautiful experience to have had.
I love that. You know, I'm so grateful for this conversation. I feel like I've learned so much from you.
Oh, bless you,
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and for sharing so much with all of us.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's such a delight. It's so nice to be able to connect in person. So
yeah, 100%.
grateful to be here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you.